You're listening to episode 198, Jennifer's Story, a son with necrotizing enterocolitis. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Child Life on Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here. Hello, my friends. I'm so glad that you're here today. And today we get to speak with Jennifer, who is the executive director and founder of the NEC Society. She is also a mom who has lost her son to necrotizing enterocolitis, and it is often referred to as NEC in the NICU. And as you'll learn, necrotizing enterocolitis can affect many, many babies and is always of utmost importance for parents to be aware of while their child is in the NICU. And again, I do want to preface this with ultimately, Jennifer did lose her son, but she speaks so much about advocacy and awareness that this is a really important episode to listen to. But I understand if you don't want to hear about child loss right now, that it's just not something that is meant for you in your day to day, then you can skip this episode and come back to it at a different time. But awareness about this is so key. And you'll learn about Jennifer's story that her son did get NEC during his NICU stay, but ultimately came home. And it's a really important story for you to listen to. So, Jennifer, I loved getting to meet you at the American Academy of Pediatrics conference. I am in awe of what you have done and created at the NEC Society, and I'm so grateful that you're here on this podcast today.
I'm Jennifer Canvasser. I'm the founder and executive director of the Necrotizing Enterocolitis Society. But more importantly than that, I am Micah, Zachary, and Elijah's mama, and this is my niece Mira, who's
Hi,
with us
Mira.
today.
We're getting all the baby love getting to see you here.
Yes. And I am on this podcast with you because my twins, Micah and Zachary, were born at 27 weeks gestation, and I was thrown into the NICU world very unprepared, like most NICU parents are. I never imagined being in the NICU. I did everything right, and then it suddenly all went wrong despite my
Mm.
best efforts. I think that's probably pretty common among NICU parents. And we figured out how to be NICU parents, my husband and I, in the weeks that Mike and Zachary were born. And they were born weighing about 2 pounds each. And
Wow.
other than, needing to figure out how to breathe and eat and just kind of normal preemie things, they were doing really well. And so by the time they were 6 weeks old, I was like, "Oh my gosh, we're gonna be out of the NICU soon." Like, they were both doing great. They had doubled their birth weight. They were beginning to nurse at the breast, and I could just kind of breathe a sigh of relief and feel hopeful that we were gonna get out of the
Yeah.
NICU and we were gonna be okay. And then Micah developed necrotizing enterocolitis, which, if you've never heard of the disease out there, NEC, also known as NEC, is a really devastating intestinal disease that affects babies that are born prematurely or have some other medical condition in their first, usually, weeks or months of life. And he got really sick really fast. He needed multiple bowel resections. He went into renal failure, but thankfully, we were at a really great children's hospital and they sent him up to the PICU and they placed him on continuous renal replacement therapy, which basically meant they were doing the work of the kidneys. And
Yeah.
his kidneys never recovered, but he got stronger. Like, Mecca kept getting better. And thankfully, at this time, Zachary had been discharged and was at home doing really well. But Micah kept getting stronger. And then we were able to bring him home, which was amazing and a dream come true. But then, about a month before their first birthday, Micah, was at home doing all right, but then developed a little cold, and that cold turned into pneumonia, and he was readmitted to the PICU. And then tragically, we lost Micah just before the twins' first birthday. And you can imagine, I'm sure you've talked with other bereaved moms before. It's just absolutely devastating. It's devastating forever. Like, it's a loss that I
Yeah.
will never ever get over. That level of heartache is like no other. It's a lifetime of loss. And so I looked around after I'd gone through about a year of just like intense grieving. And I'm like, who's working on necrotizing colitis? And I was
Yeah.
just desperate to learn more. So I was reading and just trying to understand like the disease and the community and like the field of neck. And I was really shocked to find like no one really
Yeah.
working on neck. There were, thankfully, individual researchers and scientists, but there was no one bringing everyone to the table. And so that's why I founded the NEC Society, and what brings me here with you today.
You are one amazing person. And we are so grateful that you get to share Micah and your other family members with us here. And I would love to hear a little bit just about Micah. Tell me a little bit about his personality and
Oh my
like
gosh.
something that he did that you just like
Yeah.
lights up your world and your heart when you think
Oh,
about it.
oh my gosh. Thank you for asking such a beautiful question. I love that. I think the one thing that I always like hold on to about Micah is how he smiled despite just the hell really that he
Yeah.
went through. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of his life, we couldn't hold him and we couldn't carry him around. Sometimes he couldn't even, be in our arms. And yet,
Yeah.
if we were there in front of him, talking with him, singing with him, reading him books, he would just light up
Mhm.
and he would smile and he was happy, even though he was in intense physical pain and he was recovering from surgery and he had, wires and tubes and tape all over his beautiful little face. He would just smile and was so happy. And so I really hold on to that. And I'm like, if Micah can smile through that pain,
Mm.
I can smile through anything, right? And so
Yeah.
it has really shaped my life and I think my family's life as well.
Mm, I love that. Sweet
Yeah.
Micah. What do you have of Micah's that you love and hold on to from his time with you?
Oh my gosh, I have so much. And it's really beautiful is that Mike has two living brothers. And
Mm.
so I love being able to share like Micah's physical things as well as Micah's
Yeah.
photos and like memories and things with him. But I think like one of the things I love most that I hold on to is the music and the songs that we listened to with Micah when we were
Ah,
in his NICU and PICU room. We listened to a lot of music and it was a way for us to have like a little sense of normalcy amongst the chaos. And so we were lucky to have music therapy and an amazing music therapist. And when the guitar wasn't in the room, we would put
yeah.
music on. And so I have really vivid memories with Micah with this music. And so now I'm able to share those same songs with his brothers. And I'm just like reflecting one thing that I really hold on to and just is so beautiful as we listen to Here Comes the Sun a lot with Micah in his NICU and PICU room, and his music therapist would play it on the guitar. And so I consider that to be like one of Micah's songs is Here Comes the Sun. And recently, Micah's younger brother, Elijah, learned how to play Here Comes the Sun on the piano.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it's just like such an amazing experience to hear
Yes.
Elijah, whose middle name is Micah, play
Oh,
Here Comes the
wow.
Sun, in honor
Wow.
of his brother.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I've had the honor of speaking with some other bereaved families in my
Yeah.
clinical work, but also on the podcast. And music has come up a few times. And that now these songs are like a playlist, right? That when you need
Yes.
them and you hear them and it brings it back to you. And, I would say that when I was working clinically with families who had lost a child, we focus a lot on like, what can we give you to take home?
Yep,
But the truth is sometimes those things fade and prints
yep,
fade and molds fall apart because that's just the nature of art
yep,
sometimes. But you're so right that music is something that can stay with you forever. Like we think about those songs we listened to in high school that bring up
yeah,
memories. So how powerful. I love that.
yes. Thank you, and I
Mm.
totally agree.
How old are your other sons now?
So Micah's twin is 11, so it's
Okay.
been 10 years since I kissed Micah's sweet face goodbye, and their little brother is 8. So Elijah never had the chance to meet Micah, but they are so connected and they know
I'm
one
sure.
another, and it's so beautiful. Like when they're in school and they at both for Zachary and Elijah, when their teachers ask them to draw a picture of their family, they say, "How many siblings do you have?" Like without me, obviously I'm not at school with them. They
Yeah,
include Micah in our
of
family, which
course.
it's just so beautiful and meaningful to me because that's how I've chosen to keep Micah in our family's life is keeping him very present, and he is my son, and I have 3 children, and so for his brothers to recognize and include him as well is incredibly beautiful and meaningful.
I love that. What amazing boys you have.
Thanks.
Thinking back to your time in the NICU, which is just a whirlwind, right? And like,
Mhm.
I'm sure there has been so much that's just blocked out and like, or things that just pop up out of nowhere. What were some of the things that helped you the most in getting through the day to day? Were you the type of parent who loved to write things down or go research, or did you go home to sleep at night? Like, what are some of those things? Imagine, those moms who are at the beginning of their NICU phase and are hearing
Mhm.
the word neck, who actively, have to take care of themselves. What can they do?
Yeah, such a great question. So I'm gonna answer in a couple different ways. So one for me when I was in the NICU, I wrote down and I kept a journal about, like, how I was feeling, because I would s write things that I would never say out loud to anybody because
Mhm.
either I felt too ashamed and I know that shame is not, mm, I wouldn't say it's not the right no one should feel ashamed for having a baby in the NICU, but it's pretty much unavoidable, I think, for
Right.
most parents, like, it's just natural for us to feel like we did something wrong, and so I would often, like, write about things that I knew no one would wanna hear me say. And so
Yeah.
I would write things down that I heard other people in the NICU, like, say and questions I did. I definitely, like, wrote a lot. But I think, what allowed me to kind of process and get through is focusing on what I could do in that
Okay.
moment, which oftentimes was very little. Like, I've often felt like I could do nothing, like I
Yeah.
was powerless. And so I would just try to find the things that I could do and hold on to those, whether it was read to Micah, like sitting at his bedside and just reading to him, singing to
Yeah.
him, pumping milk. And so I was never able to really nurse either of my twins because there are complications in the NICU, but I was able to pump, thankfully. And so I held on to that. I was able to, like, keep myself healthy and well so that I could take care of them, right? And so I would, like, really focus on what I could do even when it felt like I had nothing I could do, like finding the things and building relationships with his nurses was really meaningful to me and the rest of his care team. Like I mentioned his music therapist, but I had an amazing relationship with his music therapist and his nurses and really building like that trust and the rapport and those relationships. So that way in the toughest times, like you can lean on those people. So I would say that really got me through. And then for the families now who are in the NICU or just hearing about NAC or just have a baby that's being diagnosed with NAC, The NEC Society has resources on our website for families that have just, had a NEC diagnosis who have just tragically lost a baby to necrotizing enterocolitis. So if you go to our website at necsociety.org and you click for families, there's resources for recently bereaved families, families who've just had a NEC diagnosis, and just other, resources for families in the NICU. So I feel
Mm,
like, there are people like us here today working to help families that are in the NICU that are just experiencing this trauma, and walking, just beginning on this journey so that we can serve them better and they can learn from our heartache and our trauma. So hopefully we can
right.
spare them a little bit.
I know. Yeah, I think that's kind of the whole purpose of
Yep.
this podcast and you speaking out, right? It's like
Yes.
because of parents like you, somebody can hear you and say like, "Okay, I've been through this. She got through it. I can
Yep.
too."
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I do what I do. I started the Next Society because of Micah, but I keep going because I know Micah's story is not unique. And there are families in the
Mm,
NICU being diagnosed with NEC today that need us, right? And they need the resources and the work that we're doing. So I know that this is urgent, and my team and I are working tirelessly to serve and to
mm.
help NICU families.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
How common is neck and the ultimate goal, right? I love it, building a world without neck. What are some of the things that parents can do ahead of time to just be aware of it?
Mhm.
And it's one of those things, it's like you're already in the worst case scenario. Your baby's in the NICU, you're terrified, you're exhausted. You yourself, as a mom, are recovering.
Yeah.
But what things can parents start to be on the lookout for?
Yeah. I think it's important to remember that human milk is one of the most protective ways to reduce the risk of neck. It doesn't eliminate the risk. So even if your baby does receive human milk, your babies can still develop neck, but it is protective. And so I think when families understand the importance of mother's milk and of pasteurized human donor milk, that's really
Yeah,
helpful. And they can, talk to their care team about what the care team in their NICU is doing to reduce and limit the risks of necrotizing colitis. Some units have used probiotics. A lot of units have standardized feeding protocols, and they have, a checklist to make sure that they are looking out for the potential signs of NEC. So I think just really building that open line of communication is really, really important.
mm. When do you think is a good time for parents to ask that of their care team?
So, in my opinion, I actually would love to see our healthcare providers talking to families who are at risk of giving birth
Okay.
prematurely before the baby is even born. And
Yeah,
so they can start these conversations before just the chaos of the NICU
such
starts,
a
because
good
it's so
idea.
stressful once your
Yeah.
baby is born prematurely and there's so many things to worry about. But if we can have these conversations about the potential life-saving power of human milk before the baby's even born prematurely, I think that could go a long way in helping families understand that in the NICU, human milk can act as almost like a medicine, as helping to protect the babies against this disease. Again, it doesn't eliminate the risk, but it is helpful. So I think as early as possible. And, all families are different, right? Like someone like me, I want to know about as much as I can about everything. And like I
You're like, "Give
find
me all the information."
yeah, like some people are overwhelmed. I feel empowered with information. And I think a lot
Mhm.
of families do. I think families need information so that they can navigate the difficult road they have ahead. And without information, it's really hard to know, what questions do I ask? What do I look out for? So I actually think more information is empowering. And I know a lot of providers like, well, I don't want to overwhelm the families with too much information. It's like, well, they're already overwhelmed, and more information can actually help them navigate this stress and
Mm.
trauma a little more effectively.
Yeah, that's such a good point. That early intervention is just always gonna be best, and I've said this on the podcast before. My dad has this analogy. He always says, like, "Run to the danger," and his
Yeah.
point is that, like, let's talk about the hard part first,
Yes.
because
Yes.
if we just continue to let it,
Yes.
settle, it will be even more difficult,
Yep.
and that's kind of the whole premise of, my profession, child life, is that we prepare families
Exactly.
for what is coming next so that they can better anticipate it, because when it's thrown in your face and you weren't expecting it, that's when the hard part starts.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I have an example of this. When Micah was maybe 6 or 7 months old, he was still in the PICU, and they brought in palliative care. And at first, I was angry because I really didn't understand, like, I thought they were telling me Micah was dying, and he definitely was not dying at that point. But they're like,
Yeah.
"No, we want palliative care to be involved because he has a life-altering condition, like, what he has, he's gonna need a kidney transplant, he has lung disease, he has liver disease, he has a life-altering diagnosis and condition. We wanna be involved, and we wanna help you optimize his quality of life." And I'm like,
Yeah.
and once I really, like, understood and appreciated that they were there for that reason, that they wanted to help us optimize our family's quality of life and not so that Micah could die, because that's what
Yeah.
honestly I thought at first. I was like, "Oh," and so just, as an example, they ended up being amazing, and, tragically, Micah did end up dying at a cruelly just cruel young age, but having them involved allowed us to have these conversations and to walk this path in a much more peaceful way than if we were had no palliative care had never been involved, and then Micah had tragically died just before his first birthday, and we had never had that support from palliative care. But because we had had those relationships, we'd been having those conversations, like, we were able to walk that path with a lot more peace and strength than we would have without. So I totally
Mm.
agree with you. And your dad?
It Yeah, it takes such great courage to say yes to help.
Yeah,
We say a lot in terms of like let your family help you
yeah,
but to let a team like palliative care when in your head signals like, oh, this means
yeah,
death or close to death when
yes,
it really doesn't have to in the
right.
hospital setting takes a lot of courage. And I think about it too, like when parents say, oh, don't send the chaplain. That means something bad's
Mhm.
about to happen. And I often say, the chaplain is just another person like
Yeah,
a social worker or child life
yeah,
specialist. And you don't know which person is going to
right.
fit for you, which team's going to fit for you and make the
Yeah,
difference. So you know, if you're open to it and receiving it, it can be incredibly helpful.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, what can we do to help spread the mission of the NEC
Mm.
Society of Micah? Where can we direct parents? Like, how can we better support you, not only as parents who are listening and get it, but as child life specialists who just want to
Yeah.
connect families to whatever resources are available?
Oh, thanks so much for asking. You know, a few things come to mind. One is that what's good for neck babies is good for all the NICU babies, right? And so
Mm,
when I talk about like neck prevention or how do we, best care for babies that have been diagnosed with neck, that's going to be good for all the NICU babies as well. So I think one of the things we really advocate for is that parents are the most important member of the care team, right? And should be valued and centered and integrated in everything that the care team is doing. And I love child life. Child life played such a huge part in Micah's hospitalization. And one of my dearest friends is a music therapist now at the Children's Hospital, and she has been part of our story for a long time. And so I think child life has just a really fundamental and special place in our NICU, PICU, children's hospitalization journey. So I'm just so grateful for Child Life and the way that you are able to partner with families and help us advocate for our kids and help us center
mm,
us, as part of the care team and finding our place and really facilitating that communication and optimizing the quality of life that our kids have when they're in the NICU and PICU. So I'd say that. And then in terms of, how we can raise awareness, I think our website, nexsociety.org, has a lot of great content in it. For a lot of it is neck focused, but not all of it. We talk a lot about how the power of reading just books in the NICU and the PICU with our babies and kids, and how the power of reading and connecting families through books. And so we have a lot of different resources and materials on our website that's helpful for all the families. So that would be wonderful and a great
I love
connection to
that.
make.
Absolutely. Well, we will share all of that. And it reminds me of a story. I was privileged enough to get to work in a NICU. And I was in a small children's hospital and a bigger adult hospital. And we opened child life services in the NICU. And one of the first things I knew I could do was start reading to babies.
Yes.
And, as I kind of get used to staff and staff get used to me, and
Mhm.
I chose a book to read to this baby. And every time I would read a book or whatever I would do, I would write it down on a sheet of paper just so the parents knew when they came in, Katie, the child life specialist, is here. This is the book we read today, just so they knew what was happening. And so I followed up with a mom who I hadn't met yet, but I had been reading to her son. And she walked in and she was like, "You're Katie." And I said, "Yes." And she was
Mm.
like, "How did you know to read this book?"
Wow.
And I said, well, it was just the book that I, chose from
Yeah.
the library that we have. And she was like, this is the book we have waiting for him at home. It was
Oh,
such a beautiful
wow.
moment of like, I would have no idea to choose that book, but it just really
Yeah.
connected us and that experience, and she was just so
Wow.
grateful that,
I love that.
it's the small things that are the big things.
Yes, it is. It's so true. And, as you're sharing this story, I want to add that after Micah passed away, I was looking for children's books to read with his brothers that captured the experience, like our devastating loss, but also the joy of carrying
Mm,
Micah's smile. So it was both like I was looking for a storybook that captured both the devastation and the joy of our experience, and I couldn't find what I was looking for, and so I wrote Forever Our Little One, and my mom, who's an artist, illustrated it. She had never illustrated a children's book before, but I was like, "Mom, I have to
wow.
write this book, and you have to illustrate it." And so it's out. It's a story for bereaved families or just anyone who has lost a child that they love, and it helps families kinda navigate the journey to finding peace and how to carry their little one in their heart always.
Well, forever a little one. I love that.
Yeah, and it's
Well,
also
thank you.
available on our website at necsociety.org.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we will share all of that. I'm so grateful for your time today, for your sweet niece being so
Yeah, she's awesome.
understanding of our conversation today.
Mm,
And please tell your boys thank you for letting us have their mom for a little bit in the next society. And we can't wait to share your message. So thank you so much.
fabulous, thank you.
Are there any other questions or stories or things that you wanted to share that you weren't able to yet?
October is Infant Loss Awareness Month. I'm not sure when the podcast will air, but I think it's just
We're gonna make
helpful
it
to.
let's see if we can make it happen in October. Let's see what
Okay.
we can do there, okay?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so October is Infant Loss Awareness Month, and so it's a great time to just remember the babies like Micah that we hold in our hearts and carry their smiles with us.
I'm just so appreciative of your time, so thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you all so much for listening to Child Life on Call. If you head to our website, childlifeoncall.com, you're going to find all sorts of stuff there for parents, professionals, healthcare providers, child life specialists, no matter who you are. Actually, when you just go to our homepage, it'll help you direct to exactly where you need to go. On that, you'll find opportunities and PDUs for child life specialists. Parents, we've got a starter kit for you. And clinicians, we even have a clinician course, which teaches you how to be a confident and capable caregiver in pediatrics. We're so grateful that you're here. Please DM us on Instagram. And like I mentioned, when you rate and review this podcast, it helps other families be able to find us. So let's keep doing that. And I will see you again here next week.